Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, blockchain fans. Thanks for tuning in today. This is episode 167. Today we're going to be talking about something that we've talked about before, but it's been a while. So I'm happy to have my guest today, Mr. David Hoffman, the co-founder and COO of RealT. David, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Ethan. Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. So you just told me you're a podcaster too. Maybe tell us a little bit about your show and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I actually have two podcasts. The first one I started was POV Crypto with me and my Bitcoiner co-host, where we talk about different perspectives, different topics around the crypto ecosystem, and we each give our relevant perspective coming from our relevant camp. You know, I'm on the Ethereum side of things, and my co-host is on the Bitcoiner side of things, and that always produces very interesting conversations and debates. And then the other one is the Bankless podcast, which me and Ryan John Adams started, which is where POV Crypto is me and my co-host disagreeing all the time. Bankless is me and Ryan agreeing all the time and talking about what it means to live a bankless life using crypto, using blockchain, using applications on Ethereum to have a personal finance life that is independent from the legacy financial system.
That aligns pretty well with our podcast. Well, we were big into Ethereum back in the early days. We actually almost called it the Ethereum show, but for some reason we weren't sure if that was going to be the one that we wanted to stick behind. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Ether nowadays?
Well, I mean, it absolutely captures the majority of my attention in my waking hours. It's been an absolute blast to follow the story of the Ethereum blockchain, the Ethereum development. When I first got into crypto in the middle of 2017, I felt so late. I felt so behind. I thought like everyone else that had gotten in earlier than me, and I was just still learning all these things for the first time. And that was definitely just a function of just the mania of 2017 at the time. Now that it's 2020 and Ethereum is still in its proof of work phase, it seems like we are just so incredibly early in this space. And so following the progression of the Ethereum development has been really interesting.
Yeah, man, such a influential and important movement, and we've seen new blockchains, new startups emerge because of it, and maybe in corollary or in correlation to it. You mentioned the still in the proof of work stage, and I'm curious, do you think that they're going to evolve away from that, or do you think that that's going to stay true for a while?
Well, both, because there's going to be two blockchains that run in parallel, right? That's part of the transition to the Ethereum 2.0 system has these two parallel chains that have this relationship with each other, but are ultimately separate, right? And so the proof of work blockchain is doesn't even have like an end date. It's so far away. So I don't think really anyone knows the answer to this question, but 3, 4, 5+ years away before proof of work finally actually gets deprecated and we finally do a complete move to Ethereum 2.0, the proof of stake Ethereum. But we are 100% moving to proof of stake. That is definitely happening. Proof of stake is not a problem to be solved. It is something that simply just needs to be engineered and coded. Where the problem of is proof of stake possible is no longer a problem. That's behind us. And so there's and the difference between the success of Ethereum as a proof of work protocol versus a proof of stake protocol is monumental, in my opinion. I think a proof of stake version of Ethereum can be 10 times as successful as a proof of work version of Ethereum. And so I'm really happy that proof of stake is in the social contract of Ethereum and that we are committed to moving there.
I do want to get on to what you're working on at RealT, but while we're still on Ethereum, because I know that a lot of people are also interested in that, what are some of the arguments against proof of stake? Like why are some people kind of hesitant to accept that?
Yeah, so the main arguments that come from proof of stake all center around fairness, and there are pros and cons to every way to secure a blockchain, right? But if you and this is actually why I'm really happy that Ethereum had this 5-6 year proof of work period, because proof of work is a great way to distribute an asset. Nick Carter illustrates proof of work as competitive seigniorage. And so, every new Bitcoin that's issued in a block or every new Ether that's issued in a block is seigniorage. or new issuance. And that's the thing that we're trying to get away from, right? Like the Fed printing money, money printer, go burr. This is the aspect of the world that we're trying to remove. No one should have their hands on the money spigot. But at the same time, we need new issuance of new money in these blockchain protocols in order to actually secure them. And so if you turn the asset of the protocol, like Ether, into the thing that allows you to have seigniorage, it kind of has this feedback loop where if you own the asset, you also own the seigniorage. And that kind of puts a lot of concentration into the power of Ether. And since Ethereum had the ICO, there was the pre-mine, Bitcoiners will often point at that and say that that's not fair. I think people that make that claim are glossing over the fact that this same dynamic exists for proof of work, where if you bought 10,000 Bitcoins for a penny each back in 2010, you don't have to ever sell your assets because of the way that Bitcoin it works. Like you'll never be forced to sell those things. And so it works the same way in proof of work, just it's a different side of the same coin. And so I'm really, as I said at the beginning of this, I'm really glad that there was this distribution mechanism for Ether to distribute it widely, and so we can get to proof of work later. If Ethereum had started with proof of stake at the very beginning, that might not have worked so well from a distribution and fairness perspective.
You bring up a lot of good points there, and we're seeing I don't know what to call it, like a flux in not only our daily lives, our global economies, but we're seeing, the Bitcoin halving is happening pretty soon. You mentioned some changes in Ethereum that are in the works. It just seems like a lot of our lives, not only in the blockchain realm of things, are kind of being turned upside down because of this whole coronavirus thing, And I wanted to get your take on how the markets are doing in terms of being incredibly unstable. It seems like, I don't know if it's false hope, but things were getting better for a little while. Maybe give us a little bit of a semblance of hope and security, and tell us, how can we tie this all into what you're working on, and tell us about RealT.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of bearish with the whole world in coronavirus. I think that the very strong V-shaped recovery that we've experienced in the equities markets on today, April the 16th, is delusional. I think that the Fed's money printer go burr has done a good job to prop up the confidence of the markets, but at the end of the day, the economy is still paused. And the cryptocurrency industry's reaction to money printer go burr is not yet instantiated in the prices of these assets. I think we're still kind of figuring out, like, okay, money printer just went burr. Does this actually mean that the Bitcoin price is going to go up? Does this actually mean that people will be turned on to Bitcoin and see the vision that many of us see in why Bitcoin is valuable? I've seen a lot of people in the Twitter spheres like comment about how people are DMing me on my Instagram or emailing me or messaging me and saying, like, how do I buy Bitcoin that they hadn't ever talked to in like the last 5 years. So like there's signals like that we have, but it's just going to be a waiting and seeing game. With regards to like the DeFi ecosystem on Ethereum, which I consider RealT a part of, I think the narrative for DeFi is in stark contrast to some of the companies that are asking for bailouts from the money printer go burr. So the whole thesis about Bitcoin is that if there is a money spigot, then companies and people in power will position themselves close to the money spigot. And so it'll turn into a political game rather than a business or economics game. Like the main focus of your business no longer is being a good business, but rather moving yourself closer to the money spigot. And that's why big companies can position themselves with that commitment, right? Like bailing out the airlines, airline execs knew that they were just going to get bailed out. And so that changes how they operate as a business. I don't know that. I'm just hypothesizing. And so when it comes to DeFi applications, DeFi companies, things that are building protocols that use collateral, they are sound by design. And so they will never, ever need to be bailed out because of the collateral. And they can't even ask to be bailed out because they are applications, right? And so this is a much more complex narrative to illustrate for people simply than, Bitcoin doesn't have a money spigot. And so when money printer go burr, that it illustrates the power of Bitcoin. The power of DeFi is sound organizations, sound financial institutions, fully transparent code, things that would have been really nice to have back in 2008 with the financial crisis, which was inherently a financial crisis of a lack of transparency as to the books of these companies. And Ethereum turns books inside out, so everyone can see everything else. But that's such a harder thing to communicate to people, especially if they're not in the crypto world. So while I'm definitely bullish on DeFi in general, we all need to learn how to actually communicate why DeFi is important in the times of money printer go burr.
Yeah, there's a lot of good points you bring up there. Speaking to those folks who may be kind of new to cryptocurrencies and DeFi as a whole, say somebody was wanting to get involved. I know that you guys have we haven't really talked much about RealT yet.
So maybe I'll just give the pitch for RealT, right? So RealT, we're a tokenized real estate company. We take real estate properties that are in the United States and we put them into an ERC20 token on Ethereum. We tokenize them. And the way that we do that is we take a property and we put it inside of an LLC. So there's one property inside of one LLC and nothing else goes into the LLC. And what the token on Ethereum represents is it represents ownership in that LLC. And so since the LLC only does one thing, which is to own the real estate, owning the token is owning the real estate. And so that's how you tokenize real estate on Ethereum. And so that's how you get assets like real estate onto Ethereum and hopefully into these DeFi applications like MakerDAO, like Uniswap. Our assets are currently in Uniswap, which means that you can buy and sell and trade real estate assets on Ethereum through a decentralized application, through a decentralized protocol, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I'm the one that opened up the Uniswap exchange in the first place. And so they're tokenized on Ethereum, and that just means that there's more people on Ethereum that can access good quality real estate investments that couldn't before. Inside the United States, we're kind of privileged with our access to financial services and sound investments. Outside of the United States, that is much less the case. Now that Ethereum is this global, accessible, permissionless, censorship-resistant platform, anyone who is using Ethereum can access real estate.
Yeah, man, that's fascinating. So I think I understand, but maybe explain it to me a little more. Because you mentioned one LLC. Is it one LLC per real estate property? Are they all under one fund, or is each real estate property going to be divided into several? I don't even know what the term would be.
Yes, yeah. So that was a simplification. If you really want to go into detail, it's a series LLC, and so a series LLC is like a one single LLC with individual series, but the series are independent from each other. So Series 1 has nothing to do with Series 2, and Series 2 has nothing to do with Series 3, etc. And there's one property inside of one series, and it's the series that we tokenize. And so it's like a special purpose vehicle for tokenizing one property. And the series aspect of it just allows us to scale this operation up. It makes the paperwork and the legal processes really simple for copying and pasting the system and producing more real estate property. And so, when you buy a token, and there isn't just one token, you go to the website, the RealT website, and then you can add something to your cart, add a property to your cart. It's just a normal e-commerce website. You add a token to your cart, you go through KYC, you purchase it, and you check out, and then the token that is specific to that property shows up in your wallet. And so, if you buy 3 properties, you'll have sent 3 different tokens, and each token correlates to that relevant property. And each token gives you access to the rental income generated from the tenant in that specific property and no other properties, right? So each property is its walled garden, right? There's no overlap or no intermingling of the financials of different properties.
That's fascinating. So if somebody were to own some tokens in a property, say like a single family home, is it usually several different investors, or do you see one person? Can you do one token per home?
Yeah, so it's fractionalized, right? So usually, depending on the value of the property, we fractionalize it into 1,000 tokens or some multiple of 1,000 tokens. We generally target prices between $50 and $150 just to keep low minimums. And so there's 1,000 tokens, but each token is actually fractionalizable up to 18 decimal places, right? So you can really have, infinite number of investors per series because the token can be fractionalized. So for one property, there's like 1,000 tokens. We sell whole tokens on the website, so you can't buy a fraction of the token through the website. You would have to do that through Uniswap or on-chain on Ethereum somewhere. And so when it comes to like how many people own these properties, hundreds own individual properties. The biggest property that we sold, which was over $500,000, it was like $620,000, has 280 individual owners of it. And so these are highly fractionalized and owned by many people across the world. There's over 40 different countries that we have customers in, and so people from over 280 people from 40 different countries are owning the same real estate property in Detroit inside the United States, which is just absolutely insane to me. I haven't gotten over that yet.
Yeah, that's got to be, if not the first time that's happened, one of the first times. That's really awesome, man.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people get into real estate to get a return on their investment. How, I think you mentioned earlier about like a tenant paying rent. Does any of that trickle down to the token owners, or do they have to wait until they sell their tokens?
No, that gets sent out to token owners every single day. And so Ethereum, one of the cool things about Ethereum, two things, is that it's one the stable coins on Ethereum are some of the most financialized assets there are on Ethereum. So the financial infrastructure for stable coins is second only to the financial infrastructure for Ether, which means that sending, receiving liquidity for stable coins is really, really easy. And since Ethereum is not the antiquated banking system, there's no reason as to why we should be sending out rental income every 30 days, or in the case of funds, every quarter or every year, even. Because block times are every 12 seconds, we can send out rental payments every single day. And so when you go to the website, you'll actually see like the rent per token per day that you receive. And so in our system, we send out rent to all properties every single day based off of how many tokens you have. So our contract looks up the location of all of the tokens for a specific property, and then it pro rata sends out an appropriate amount of rent to all those token holders on a 24-hour cycle. The main reason why we do this, other than the fact that it's really cool, is for secondary market stability, because you can buy and sell sell a real estate property as many times as you want in a day. You can go to Uniswap, buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. And so what the daily rental payments does is it stabilizes the price on the secondary market, because if everyone knew that the payout is coming on the first of the month, everyone would go to Uniswap and they would buy all the tokens on the 31st, collect that rental payment on the 1st, and then sell on the 2nd. And so because we send out rent every single day, that smooths out the value of the token on the secondary market.
Wow, that's a very good system. I guess my question now would be for the tenant: are they paying in cryptocurrency, or are they paying in traditional fiat?
Yeah, so the tenant of these properties actually has a very typical relationship with their landlord, and the landlord is a company that we contract with. Depending on the location of the property, it'll be a different property management company. But for the ones in Detroit, they're all the same. And so the tenant just pays the landlord as normal. And they don't even know that they are in a RealT property. They just have their normal relationship with the landlord, the property management company, and then the property management company takes the rental income, takes out their cut. That's how they get paid. And then they send the remainder to RealT, where we swap out for stablecoin and then trickle it out on a daily basis to all the token holders.
Wow, very good. And I'm assuming this would be advantageous for a property owner that hasn't paid, like doesn't own the property outright, or are you seeing like landlords who have already bought their property put it on to your system?
Everyone asks us a lot of the questions that we get in our intercom or on our Discord is, okay, so who owns the properties then? And the answer is, well, the real token holders own the property. The people that bought the tokens on the website, they're the property owners. And so if you're interested in tokenizing your property, we can do that for you. You have to own the property outright. There can't be a mortgage. And then you basically sell the token or sell the properties to an LLC, and then you are returned the tokens. And then you can do, as a property owner, you can do whatever you want with those tokens. We encourage you to sell the tokens on the RealT website. And so that's how a property comes to be tokenized, right? Remy and John Mark Jacobson, the two other co-founders of RealT, are very experienced real estate investors, and so they know the properties that they want to put on RealT first. Plenty of people want to come and tokenize their property because they think that's interesting, and they think that's probably a fun activity to do. We're not ever sure about people's commitments to that actually going through with that. And so for the first phases of RealT is we are selecting the best properties that we've identified, purchasing those properties outright, and then tokenizing them and selling them on RealT just as proof of concept. And then since that concept has been proven out, we are now opening up access to other people that want to tokenize and sell through RealT and through our platform.
Wow. And just to take the question, a step in the weird direction, it would say there's a tenant that might know. Would they be able to buy tokens in the property that they're renting?
Yeah, in theory, sure. Yeah, and that would actually be really cool, right? So, like, if there are 1,000 tokens and a tenant wants to reduce their rental payments, they can buy 20% of the tokens, and then they receive their own rental payments. And so they would just be effectively reducing their rental costs by 20%. One, not small hiccup is that for US investors, you have to be accredited. And so usually the people that are renting these properties are not accredited investors. And so that wouldn't be an option to them. But in theory, it's possible.
Right. Yeah. There's that whole accredited issue. So how does that work with international investors? Do they have to subscribe to like United States law, or what's the regulation look like for that?
Yeah. So each property that we sell is a Reg D or Reg S property, which are filings with the SEC that allow us to do this. Reg D allows us to sell to accredited investors. Reg S allows us to sell to international investors. And that's really the majority of the extent of the filings that we have to do on the US side. Each country that we sell to has their own kind of legal restrictions. None of them are too complicated or cumbersome to overcome. France's legal restrictions are mainly centered around you can't have more than a certain number of French investors for a specific property, and so we have to keep our French investors specifically below a certain number. But other than that, it's just a matter of the filings of the Reg D and the Reg S with the SEC, which are relatively simple.
Wow, man, I'm really impressed. This is a really, really interesting and impressive project you've got going. So how long have you guys been in development? And
thanks, man.
You're welcome, man. How long was the road to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so we started this process in November of 2018 and first went live in May of 2019. And then it took us like 6 months to sell our first property, so a really long time. And then it took us 3 months to sell our second property. And then it took us 3 weeks to sell our third property. And so things have really been kicking up ever since. So we've been doing this for about a year and a half. And we just recently crossed the $1 million threshold mark of tokenized real estate on Ethereum, which we're super proud of. Now that there is $1 million on Ethereum, the next milestone is obviously $10 million on Ethereum, but also $1 million worth of real estate inside of DeFi. So now we have two goals ahead of us, more total real estate on Ethereum, and also getting our real estate assets into the Ethereum applications so that our customers can use their real estate assets as collateral inside of Ethereum's financial applications. All financial applications on Ethereum require collateral, right? Like that's how these systems work, is through you achieve trustlessness through collateral. And what is the world's best collateral? It's real estate. It's really, really good collateral. It's very high value, and it's pretty easy to claim it if you have some sort of liquidation or something. If you own the real estate isn't running away from anyone, right? Like you can't pick up real estate and move it, and so it's really easy to have a claim on. And so, in addition to putting more real estate on Ethereum, we're also looking to get more of our real estate assets inside of Ethereum's DeFi applications.
So earlier you were talking about how different cryptos could be transformed, and we haven't really talked much about that, not since the days of Shapeshift. And I'm curious if somebody has Ether, are they able to, assuming they're an accredited investor, can they just already transform that into your token, or is there a more of a process to get there?
Yeah, so you can go to Uniswap and you can buy and sell these real estate properties right through Uniswap. So Uniswap is a decentralized exchange where the way that it works is that instead of it being an order book based exchange, there are two pools of assets. And for all the RealT assets, one pool is Ether and the other pool is the RealT assets, the real estate properties. And so if you want to buy them, you come and take your Ether and you put it into the Ether pool. And then the Uniswap protocol allows you to take out an equal amount of value of the asset on the other side, in this case, real estate. And so this is the tool that allows people to buy, sell real estate really, really quickly, which is unheard of in the real estate world. The only hiccup is that because these are technically security tokens, they aren't tokens that represent real estate. They're tokens that represent an LLC that owns real estate that makes these securities. And so there's a whitelist. And so in order to get on the whitelist, you have to go to the RealT website, buy your first token, sign a quick document, and then you're on the whitelist, and then you can participate in the Uniswap exchange.
Very good. Earlier you were talking about Ethereum, something of particular interest to me and a lot of our listeners. And, other than real estate, do you think any other industries are going to be disrupted? I mean, we've seen a little bit about healthcare and insurance, but nothing major. But do you know of any projects or anything that might become revolutionized?
I think the first industries of the world that are going to be significantly impacted by Ethereum are the ones that are financial in nature. Healthcare has a lot of problems when it comes to payments and capital and who owes what. But I don't think Ethereum in its current form or blockchain systems in their current phase are ready to solve that problem. And I would say that's similar for supply chains. Blockchains and supply chains seemingly go hand in hand. Like you need this traceable accounting ledger of assets, but blockchains currently in their current form are really about money systems or value systems, and supply chains aren't exactly that. There's something a little bit different. And so I think the first industries that are going to be disrupted are banks, exchanges, anything that deals with assets, specific assets that you need financial services around. And so that's why real estate, I think, is first on that list. Because real estate is the world's most valuable industry, coming in at like 1/3 of the total world's value. And it's also super illiquid, which blockchains are pretty good at providing liquidity for. After real estate, things like bonds, I think, would be the next most valuable thing to tokenize on Ethereum. Perhaps less interesting because bonds, in comparison to things like Bitcoin and Ether, bonds just aren't interesting. But maybe that's my bias as a crypto person, also as a young millennial crypto person. Maybe bonds are more interesting to other people who aren't so risk adverse as I am. And so mainly, I think you can go down the list of the world's most valuable assets, and that represents the most likely candidates of disruption when it comes to Ethereum and blockchain development.
Do you see any limitations with the current DeFi space? Anything that you'd like to change or that you wish in the future could change?
Yeah, the DeFi ecosystem is really limited because of the small variety of assets that it has available to it. So it has Ether, which is really nice, and then it has DAI, but DAI is basically just stabilized Ether, right? And then there's also off-chain dollars like USDC or Tether or Gemini dollar. And so there are some selections of assets. There's also tokenized gold from Paxos. But it's not that much. And also Ethereum itself is kind of limited because like all of its financial applications really only serve Ether and Ether holders. And that is a very small portion of the global population. Ethereum as a platform and DeFi as an ecosystem will be a lot more useful when the DeFi applications can offer their financial services, their financial products to assets that aren't Ether. As an Ether holder, I'm super happy with Ethereum applications providing me financial services, but also as an Ethereum bull, I want other people to issue and deploy assets onto Ethereum so that those assets can access financial services. And so, the DeFi ecosystem is really, really hungry for new assets that aren't Ether. And that's, I think, the big missing piece of DeFi, which is also a really hard problem to overcome. Like getting off-chain assets onto a blockchain is not an easy problem. And so it's definitely difficult to overcome, and we're working through that at RealT, and then hopefully we can satisfy the demand for real estate assets. But there also needs to be plenty of other companies that are issuing other assets that aren't just real estate on the Ethereum blockchain too.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned getting assets on the chain. For a lot of people, I imagine it could be hard to get assets off the chain. And for whatever reason, maybe somebody is down on their luck right now and they need to pull that money into different forms so that they can use to eat, What's your take on that? Because some people are on the mindset that once they have, say, Ether, it should stay there, you should use it as it is. And others kind of want to treat it like stocks to invest. And you kind of see two schools of thoughts that kind of are going down their separate paths. And I've heard people before saying, like, if you take it away, you got to replenish it. I guess my question is, how do you operate with cryptocurrencies?
So if it's a question of how do you get your value that you have on Ethereum off of Ethereum, and you have that value like inside of Ether or inside of real estate assets, like the RealT tokens, they're not coming off Ethereum. And the only way that would happen is that if one person purchased every single token for a given property, which would then give them governing rights, and then they would be able to like de-tokenize the property. The likelihood that somebody is going to be able to buy every single token is unlikely. And so rather than getting your tokens, your real estate off of Ethereum and back into the legacy world, you're better off just selling your tokens and then selling the dollars and getting that value off. We want the real estate to stay as an asset on Ethereum. And so that's why we've created that very high threshold. When it comes to getting value off of Ethereum, I think the easier path is to sell your assets for a stablecoin like USDC, and then send it to Circle Bank and then swap for dollars, where you leave the asset itself on Ethereum, but you just sell it. And so maybe the total market cap of whatever assets in question gets smaller, but the asset itself does actually stay on Ethereum.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm always kind of fascinated by just the exchange process and how that all works. When I was younger, I don't know if it's an urban legend, but there was a story about a guy in Canada who traded paperclip over the years and eventually got a house. Yeah, that kind of story. Do you think it's possible for someone to start small and eventually become an accredited investor and, say that there are some young millennials or even younger that, want to go down this path? How are they going to educate themselves and eventually become accredited investors and start to get these tokens?
Yeah, so I think who does this? Anthony Pompliano does this at the end of every one of his podcasts. Is if you could change one law, what would it be? And like more than 50% of the time, the guest answers with the investor accreditation laws. And actually, not too long ago, the SEC did put out some statement or I can't remember. I'm fuzzy on the details, illustrating that they are actually interested in revamping the investor accreditation laws. The investor accreditation laws are there for a reason, to protect investors, but at the same time, they have a very large unintended consequence of restricting good real estate or good investments in general to people that are already wealthy. And it's kind of, there's a really good word for this. It's kind of like treating everyone like children, saying they are not worthy of managing their own assets. They can't understand the risks, and so we need to take care of them for them. And infantilizing. It's infantilizing. And I'm optimistic that these accreditation investor laws do change. With regards to like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and getting yourself accredited just by making trades, that is a cool story. I don't think that it is scalable. I think if we saw that happen, that would be a fun blog to read, a fun podcast to listen to about how somebody started with nothing and then became accredited. It's the American dream, right? But I think that is going to be limited to a very small number of people. And so really the way to open up access to financial infrastructure is to rethink how we think about these investor accreditation laws.
Yeah, it's an interesting crossroads. You've got kind of the freedom, the cypherpunk music movement, where there was kind of breaking down barriers, kind of not exactly renegades, but I guess that spirit. And then we see it kind of intermingling with the legacy, investment world. And it's kind of I don't know, it seems like we're still like in a hybrid type of situation where you kind of have to give and take a little bit to make these work. But I think you guys are doing a pretty good job. I mean, it's very impressive what you've been able to do so far. And I'm curious what it is that you guys are continuing to try to achieve, if there's any goals in the future, or are you just going to keep doing what you're doing?
The overarching goal is getting real estate assets into DeFi, allowing people to use tokens as collateral. We want to be inside of MakerDAO as collateral. We want people to be able to open up a vault with their real estate tokens and then pull out a line of credit of sorts based off of the collateral inside the vaults. That's really awesome financial services that it cannot be replicated anywhere else. And so that is the dream. There's also this other protocol called Balancer, which is kind of like Uniswap, where there's pools of assets and it allows anyone to come in and deposit one type of asset and pull out the other. The difference with Balancer is instead of 2 assets, it's 8. And then in theory, you could go up to 16, 32, or as many pools as possible. And so what that does is like we have 8 different real estate properties, right? And so in Balancer, you could deposit all 8 different real tokens into 8 different pools that all converge into this one single Balancer pool. And what happens is that Balancer issues a single token that represents all of the assets in the Balancer pool. So like this one token represents exposure to all 8 of the real estate properties beneath it. And what you can do when you really open this up, by the time this happens, we'll also have many different properties in many different cities. And so all of our properties are currently in Detroit. We're looking to go into the Chicago market soon. After that, LA, Cleveland, New York, Seattle, San Francisco. And so I would imagine that there's like one Balancer pool for every single city. And then you can combine all those together into like this tree type structure. And then what you can also do is you can allow other people to make your own Balancers. And so you can take single family homes. You can take large condominiums. You can take high rental producing properties. You can take waterfront properties, and people can make their own Balancers and create their own pools of funds and allow people to mix and match to create their own real estate structure, their own real estate REIT. And so it's like a build your own real estate REIT workshop. And I think that's pretty cool. That's definitely in line with the vision of crypto economics and DeFi and financial infrastructure. And so that's the long-term roadmap for RealT.
Awesome, man. And I just have 2 more questions. The first one would be to go back to property owners. Say they're not accredited investors, but they own their property. Would they be able to tokenize it? And is that like selling their house for these tokens?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting scenario. I don't know if the property seller isn't accredited, if they can tokenize their property. I think they can tokenize their property. They just won't be able to rebuy it. They'll have to sell it to others, and they would generate the revenue for that. They would generate the sale, but they would not be able to actually buy their own tokens in that case.
So how would they get their money back? Would it be through I guess I'm unclear of how, if they can't.
Where does the money come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. So RealT.co is the website, right? And it's just a normal e-commerce website. So when people come and buy the tokens, they pay through Coinbase, they pay through crypto or PayPal or the other merchants that we have there. And so we take in the money and then we hand it off to the person selling the property. And so the money comes in through the website, and then we would bundle it up and sell it or give the money to the seller after the tokens are purchased.
Okay, so the seller would get dollars, and then the buyer would get the tokens.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect sense. Right on, man. And my last question is to kind of bring it full circle. We started talking about Ethereum very early in the show. We were big fans of the DAO, the one that got hacked, and then we were kind of heartbroken. And you mentioned the MakerDAO. Is there any relation, and what's the differences there?
Yeah, so the DAO was this very experimental fund where people would put their ether into the DAO, and then they would have some sort of governance mechanism as to where to allocate the capital inside of the DAO and where to invest in order to hopefully generate some sort of return. It was extremely ambitious. It was way ahead of its time. It was way too early, and it was well before we understood that deploying code to Ethereum is not that easy. MakerDAO, now the term DAO has been like has been recycled and reused and reformed to be used in many different ways. And so now a DAO is just a distributed set of people across the globe who deposit their funds into this capital organization system, and then each DAO kind of operates by its own laws and rules and logic. And so the most basic DAO, which is Moloch DAO, which was created by Amin Soleimani, which is just this contract on Ethereum that people submit ether to, and then they all vote with where they should send that ether to, kind of like the original DAO. But Moloch DAO is not seeking a return. It's a grant giving DAO. And so MakerDAO is the system that produces the DAI stablecoin. And if you want stability, you need to reference something off-chain, which means some amount of human involvement is required. And so the MakerDAO system is the DAO that manages the human involvement required to dependably produce the DAI stablecoin. And so it has nothing really to do with the DAO other than the structure that, there's a bunch of humans that are governing a system.
Very good, man. Well, thank you for taking the time to explain some of these concepts. I really appreciate the level of knowledge and insight that you can offer our audience, man. I'm continually amazed by like the caliber of guests that the show is getting. Like it just gets more and more amazing. So I'm really grateful for you to come on. This show has kind of become like an introduction to a lot of people about how these technologies are going to not only change the world, but how it's happening right now. So if anybody's listening who might be able to participate, tell them where they can learn more, connect with you, and definitely tell us how we can subscribe to your podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to join the RealT community, which is a pretty robust group of global people who are interested in tokenized real estate, you can join our Discord and our Telegrams. We also have a French-speaking Telegram if any French-speaking people are looking for other French-speaking crypto people to talk to. You can find those links on our website at realt.co. Where you can also sign up and buy your first tokenized real estate on Ethereum if you are an international or accredited investor. If you want to listen to my podcasts, you can follow POV Crypto Pod or the Bankless Podcast. That's POV Crypto Pod on Twitter, and then Bankless HQ on Twitter. And then I'm also Trustless State on Twitter. So you can ping me there, and then you can also find me in the RealT Discord as well if you want to chit chat.
Awesome. All right, David Hoffman, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks, Ethan. This is great.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of The Blockchain Show, and thank you to David Hoffman for joining us. Earlier we mentioned the Ethereum show, and funny enough, that's going to be a spin-off podcast we're going to debut here later this week with Steve Anderson and his friend Joey. I'll be on that briefly, and we'll see where that goes. So be sure to tune in and check that out, focusing on Ethereum. Check out theblockchainshow.com if you'd like to catch up on some old episodes, or email us at info@theblockchainshow.com.